Hello viewers and welcome to Ed Talks. Today we speak to Yuvraj Sharma, who is a co-founder and chief product officer at Komoanions. Yuvraj recently launched Edverse, which is an education metaverse. Yuvraj believes that the future, the tomorrow, the children need to be backed with great skill sets. And this is what Yuvraj plans to do with Edverse. And if these skill sets are backed with some mind-blowing technology, then it's a different world altogether, literally as well. Let's hear what Yuvraj has to say about the new metaverse that the whole world is talking about.
Who will be the four pillars, as I would call them, in this metaverse. So our first pillar would be the educators, educators all over the world, and these necessarily may not be the typical teachers who go and teach in any institution. It could be you, me, anyone who feels that anything to share in terms of knowledge and pass it on to the next generation. So a lot is happening within that space. So the promoters are going to be people who will actually pick up land to virtual learning spaces or create co-learning spaces, as they may be called it, so that these spaces could be rented out, leased, or be used for the purpose of education between the teacher and the taught. So between these four stakeholders is what we envision that the entire education will be driven over the course of the next 2 decades. And we firmly believe that Edverse is rightly positioned. There are a lot of research reports available which say that the metaverse is going to be like a $13 trillion economy by 2030. We believe education is the best use case, and Edverse could be a significant contributor to that $13 trillion economy that we envision. And I think the whole approach and the course and the vision with which education is being looked at. See, at the end of the day, you spend 15 years of your life, you dedicate 15 years in school, you spend another 3 or 4 years doing your higher education, and in some cases even higher. So you're spending the maximum amount of your time which is devoted to educate yourself and be relevant in the world outside. How wonderful will it be to spend that time in the metaverse, get to learn from the best, and ensure that not only is it that learning from the best, it could even help you expand to other areas. So we are not just focusing on subjects, we are also going to be focusing on skills. For example, collaborated with the world's leading opera singer. We've collaborated with the world's leading chef. So the opera singer wants to open a virtual opera singing academy. So anyone who's interested in that can enroll for that. A very famous chef is coming to open his own culinary school. So if you're interested to pick up any of those culinary skills, you can enroll for that. So Edverse is not just for those typical subjects as we know them as school or college or higher ed. Yes, it definitely caters to them, but it caters to a whole holistic world of the word education and the umbrella that kind of falls under, right? So it kind of does that as well. The other and the most interesting part is that we make a very informed use of blockchain. Desktop version now available. You right now don't need those heavy headsets. We are very cautious of the fact that we are aware of the fact that a lot of that technology is yet to arrive, and hopefully by the end of the year, with all these big brands talking big things about how even these headsets are going to be more accessible, more reachable, more affordable. But till such time, we've ensured that even if you have a laptop or a desktop, you could download our build and you could experience learning through that mechanism as well. So it's going to be an entire 3D experience delivered onto your desktop/laptop. The environment and everything will be same, just that when you wear the headset, then you can't see the outside world, right? So you get that impression you are in the world. So obviously we can't do that, but then the entire 3D experience of moving around, roaming around, selecting a certain avatar for yourself, then all of that will be there in the desktop version as well. So absolutely right, because the reason for the limited usage is that there aren't enough use cases. So now with players like us coming on board and developing that kind of content, so it's the same story. Today you find a lot of 4K and 8K television sets available, but even on television you don't have that resolution for people to enjoy. Even if they want to watch daily soap or anything for that matter. So I think there are some things which go hand in glove with the time. So we understand that, but like I said, there's a lot of anticipation with that big players are going to be introducing affordable devices soon, and it will be a norm. So today, like it's hard to believe that in any household you will not have a smartphone. So similarly, while we prepare for the upcoming decade, we do envision that in the next 6 months to about a year, you will see a lot of influx of these gadgets at affordable prices, and hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years they'll reach homes. But till such time, we do have a desktop version also available, which can be enjoyed by the learners, by the educators, and by the other members of the adverse community to sort of start interacting. And as the tech evolves, it will be a completely newer dimension towards learning, is what we feel. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with what you're saying, but I'm sure with all these like I'm saying, with all these tech players focusing and genuinely wanting mass adoption. So today, if you look at brands like Facebook and or their parent brand Meta, like even for that, they're looking at metaverse as the next thing to ensure that there is social networking, right? Which is beyond just watching each other's images online. So I'm sure the tech will also evolve. I think all these brands are experimenting with these affordable headsets, and we do hope that soon that time will come that this will be affordable. I mean, like when you talk about the entire EV utility space, right? So things are happening and evolving. So I think it does take a little bit of time for the tech to be made accessible to, like you rightly said, to everyone out there. But like I said, at least to enjoy and leverage, people who have a desktop or a laptop can start using it. And we are also working very diligently to ensure that at least some part of it can also be experienced through a simple browser. So browsers are usually accessible even on your tabs and other stuff as well. So at least let's give the education fraternity a feel of metaverse and get them to be the early adopters, while tech also ramps up. In another few years from now, we see a complete sea change in the way education is happening globally. What we're trying to do is not to sort of push them in any direction. We don't necessarily look at it that way. We look at it from the perspective that even if today you are a learner in any part of the country, you should have access to how things happening. So it's like when I look at a grade, let's say a class 4 student here in India and maybe a class 4 student anywhere in the world, how wonderful will it be if these kids could interact with each other, participate in the same class. And just the sheer fact that when you hear something and when you undergo any kind of a teaching process, you see that he's also my age. Look at the level of question and look at his thought process. What is he thinking? That is what really sparks the mind, right? And we want those sparks to happen across a million minds, so that the world, as we call it, as a global village, should genuinely be one. And things like education and knowledge should not be confined to by the physical geographies of where you are and where those institutions are. I think education should be completely democratized, and everyone should have the right to the best quality of education, irrespective of the fact that wherever you are geographically located. So we are looking at it from that light, that we want to cut down on the barriers. We want to ensure that the best of knowledge is available. A lot of peer interaction should flow through within people. Knowledge sharing should be encouraged, and yet at the same time, we want to immerse themselves into an experience, because a metaverse is not. That is what I'm saying. That it's not about a Zoom call that we're doing right now, right? This interaction could have been way better if we were interacting in the metaverse. So maybe next time we do get to do this interaction in the metaverse, I'm sure the experience you will also see is a lot better. And maybe I could take you inside the human brain and help you also visualize what it feels like to be inside there. So that's what the opportunity that presents. And I think as a generation, I think the onus is on us to embrace this new change and accept it with open arms and say, look, hey, the generation that is going to be coming out of schools and colleges maybe 15 years later or 20 years later, should have access to the most immersive learning experience ever. And that's what the opportunity that Ed.5 presents. Everything will have its own pros and cons, be it social media or be it anything. I think it's for the intelligent lot to figure out that usage, and we at our own end are socially responsible, wherein we do bring out, it's just like Apple gives you on your phone, your screen time, right? So we do advise, that this is your screen time and you should maybe cut down on that. But I think just because of that, we should not restrict the learners of today from the opportunity that it brings in to learn from the very best. And when you talk about isolation, see, I also feel at times that a lot of our kids, be it in school or college, at times also are on a back foot because they've not really had that global exposure. And because for all this while you've only been interacting with the peer community that is available in your vicinity, right? But then it's from a very early age, you're interacting with your peers who could be from different countries. You start understanding mindsets a lot better. You start appreciating, the different vantage points with which one looks at various complex concepts, and you start appreciating minds a lot more. So I think in a way, it's not putting people in isolation. I think it's also bringing people closer and helping them understand different cultures, different mindsets, different people. So in a way, it's good as well. But yeah, like I said, with all good things, you have to be responsible as well, right? So we do our bit, but I'm sure that these are things which I think even the users will acknowledge at their end. Yeah. So it's all made in India by Indians. So everything is done in-house. So we're really proud of that. And we don't outsource. We create all our 3D immersive environments in-house. All our tech team is in-house. All the subject matter experts, the instructional designers, the visualizers, the creative guys, everyone's is in-house. Yeah, so we're not associated with that typical crypto world. Metaverse, I think, because it's a very new subject. So whatever we've heard, I think has been good and encouraging. And I think we just recently had the Digital India program being spoken about. I am pretty confident that the government will also support the use case of education in the metaverse. Yeah, we've already had some 5 schools onboarded with us. We're very close to also onboard a very prestigious university as well. So these are going to be, like I said, the early adopters. So with these schools and universities and colleges, be coming on board, we definitely see penetration into mainstream education, and these institutions aggressively using it. Yes, so the idea is there, and that is something that I briefly touched upon. That today I definitely see that at least browser accessibility is there. Even through smartphone, you have your browsers. So if we can provide a more seamless experience even on a browser, then I think we can even go to the remotest part of the country and start getting kids and teachers there as well to onboard. So we are working towards that part as well. Yes, we are working on that aspect also. So right now, the content obviously is available in English, but we're working to ensure that it is available in Hindi soon. So once we do it in English and Hindi, then obviously we'll try and go for other vernacular languages as well, because you're absolutely right. In terms of real penetration to happen, we will have to offer it in a language that people understand best. NFTs, as the name would suggest, are non-fungible tokens. Okay, now NFTs can work in different manners. So let's look at the example of the brain, right? So now the creator can actually create a 3D asset or a 3D model, which could be that of a brain, and can sell it out as an NFT, which can then be picked up by an educator, and you can create your own lesson around it package it, and then sell it. So what can happen is that once that NFT is there, even if you, let's say, you've long sort of left planet Earth, the NFT could still exist, right? And whoever is the beneficiary of the NFT could still be rewarded through that mechanism. So NFTs are definitely there, and all the asset creation that we talk about could be the human brain, could be all these various kind of assets, educational assets, could be turned into NFTs, and then people can pick up those NFTs, create lectures, to share courses about various topics. Ultimately for me, learning has always been an experience, and I think that's there for everyone. I think the reason why for all these years, with such heavy investments going into especially education and all these different sectors, why do you still see the child of today disengaged or uninterested in learning? Because unfortunately, the reality of the day is that the experience is not rewarding, the experience is not captivating. But when you put people into these real scenarios, into these real world scenarios, you are able to, as you rightly put it, you're able to give them something which they'll probably remember for the rest of their life. So yeah, I think metaverse is like a step closer to, as close to an experience that you can get in a virtual space, and that can really prepare you for the challenges that lie ahead. I would probably say that they should first come and experience things for themselves to see that. I mean, I am speaking to a lot of these people globally as well. People who are specialists. I was actually talking to someone who works with a very leading football club in Europe, and they are making very informed use of the same in things like biomechanics. Because at the end of the day, how you perform as an athlete has got a lot to do with biomechanics, and sadly, the human eye cannot even judge that correctly. So you need that specific input, you need that kind of help, you need that kind of an environment or that simulation for you to actually do well in the real world as well. So and that's what I'm saying, that when we talk about education, we should not just look at it from the point of view as academics or core subject oriented only. I think things like sports science and biomechanics and all these fields are also leveraging a lot through the use of metaverse. And it's also about acting. It's also about training them to be in a certain way. I for example, also know that today a lot of defense organizations across the world are also using it. So today, when you talk about their training, it's like the hardest probably. But then, even if you train so hard, how do you know that for example, in a hostage situation, whether your brain will work or you'll have a brain fade moment and you don't not know what to act? Imagine, if it's part of the physical training that you do on ground, it can also be supplemented by an experience in the metaverse. That if God forbid, some kind of a situation happens, how will your brain function? How will you react, behave, and act? Right. So what I'm saying is, I think there has to be support, and there has to be acceptance, and there has to be a good handshake between what you do in the real world and what you do in this space as well. We are obviously not talking about an extreme scenario that you're not going out only, right? So that is not to be done, but I still believe, so that's what I'm trying to say, that even today when you look at if for example I talk about my own industry, right? So you do spend at least 6 to 8 hours sitting in a classroom, right? Now what I'm saying is that can I reduce that time? Can I ensure that instead of spending 6 to 8 hours, I'll probably take not more than 3 to 4 hours, which will give you an additional 2 to 3 hours to spend in the real world outside, spend more time on your fitness, do whatever you want to do, practice yoga or meditation, do a whole lot of other things. And yet I'm ensuring that that time that you're committing to me is the best experience that you can possibly get within that time frame. So I think that whole itinerary has to be rethought of. It's like today, with the advent of these OTT platforms, the entire experience of consuming content has changed, right? So I'm sure, with things like metaverse coming, all these things will eventually be like a time saver, so that you can then get to spend time on other aspects as well. So it should be looked at in that light. but I think it only accelerates it further, right? So it's like saying that when you put people into immersive scenarios, and you put them into challenging scenarios, right? I think the brain goes actually a notch higher, so that you're able to then perform better, be more intuitive, be more imaginative, be more creative and more expressive. It's like how Seth Godin describes the purple cow experience in his famous book called as the Purple Cow. And he says this beautiful example that imagine you're driving on the road and suddenly you see a purple cow, right? So you will just stop. I mean, like, hey, what is this? You drive another 10 kilometers, you see two of them, then your brain would probably say, maybe, right? Drive another 10 kilometers, you see hundreds of them. So your brain will finally convince you that maybe they exist and you never knew of them, right? But it's that first moment of seeing something extraordinary that is always the time that it kind of opens up the brain to a world of possibilities. So the more experiences that you get, I think it only accelerates the brain. And so technically, I think we call it as neuroplasticity, which is your ability to respond and correspond, and how the brain trains as well. I think with all these kind of experiences, and that's what we all keep on saying, that it is about accelerating the human race ahead and into a more evolved human species. And I think with things like metaverse and all these experiences, I think the possibilities are infinite. So it will only enhance it, but not curtail it. I think education itself is a huge umbrella. So, we're already talking about mainstream education, we're talking about skills, we're talking about systemic enhancements. So I think enough for a lifetime. So far, none, because we haven't really, come across anyone who's doing it at the scale at which we are envisioning things to be. There are a few, I think, who are very specific into only, for example, teaching coding or just teaching some very specific skills. But in terms of expanding that umbrella to the whole gamut of what education as an industry can offer, I don't see any competitors so far. But hope we have competition soon, and then it will be a nice space to be in. Okay, so as far as the teach part is concerned, I think anyone who knows how to operate a smartphone is, to my mind, very well qualified to conduct a class in a metaverse. That is not really a challenge. As I mentioned before as well, that we are tying up with these schools, colleges, universities. So that's going to be the first place wherein we want to encourage them to come on board, get the faculty, and for them to take a class. And I think through that we want to ensure mass adoption as well, because then suddenly you have these colleges, and colleges themselves have said that let's say there is a MBA college who have a collaboration with a college in France. So how beautiful it will be that their professor here and the professor in France could jointly take a lecture, and all these students could be in the same classroom, right? So that is, I think, which is opening different avenues, and a lot of these people are showing a lot of positive interest. And I think for now we have the pre-alpha version which is out. We are probably another month away wherein we'll actually allow people to take classes of their own choice as well within the metaverse. Which will suddenly open, the gates open to anyone who wants to sign up and take a class and just get a feeler of how it feels to be in a metaverse and to experience a class in a metaverse. For me, education is huge. So I definitely envision that so like even in our current pre-alpha, we've given them a nice tour of the Taj Mahal, right? So imagine going to the pyramids in Egypt. But then the whole idea here is that just the way you would find tour guides, there could be an expert who knows everything about it. All that person now needs is just a 3D asset which can be created by one of the creators, and then you can create the custom course. That is what I'm saying. The lens through which we look at the word education has to be expanded to way beyond our current understanding of just subjects and degrees and certain qualifications. I think education is something that happens to us every single moment of our life, right? So that's what Edverse would want to bring out. That as far as there is a desire to learn anything, or to explore anything, I think that's a better word. Edverse has to be your go-to place for that, be it subject scale, systemic enhancements, all these kinds of tours as well. And we have a internally, we have a huge ambition that how wonderful it will be that if, let's say, rather than reading about the ancient era, if you could spend a day, for example, in that world, right? How wonderful would that be for you to get a sense of how life was back then, right? So even things like that, we are working upon and have plans to get the audiences to explore that as well.